All right. Well, while everybody is joining, we're going to go ahead and give it probably another 3 or 4 more minutes. We'll start to, I think, 11:05 Central. Quite a few signups still waiting for people to trickle in. Should be hiding names as they come in, but that's all right. So we'll go ahead and give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. And as I'm doing that, I will be muting individuals as they join, just to kind of keep the conversations quiet and kind of focus for today. And then what I'll end up doing is there's a chat that will be opening up for any outstanding questions or items that we want to kind of discuss, or if there's questions or elements that maybe you want to discuss in future webinars, throw those in the chat. I am opening that up now and having somebody assist reading those, and we'll cover those as well. But towards the end, if we want to, we can kind of lower the size of the group a bit and also do a kind of an open-ended question and answer. So again, give it a couple more minutes and we'll get started. All right, so it's about 5 after. Let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm going to do is I'll kind of just give a quick introduction, kind of the goals of today's webinar and this conversation. We'll try to keep it well under 30 minutes. I know lunch hour for a lot of people, depending on the part of the country that they're at. Also, upcoming long Labor Day weekend likely is starting early for a lot of people. First weekend of college football. I would imagine there's a lot of alumni events and engagement that's happening. So won't hold you too long today. We will be breaking this out into multiple part webinar series. So we'll be sending out some messages and some reminders and some signups, probably to cover 2 or 3 more topics over the course of the next month. So kind of rapid fire, a lot being thrown at people in a short amount of time, but from a timeliness perspective, a lot of our alumni clients are getting the ball started and launched here shortly. So trying to maximize and provide the most value as humanly possible in a short amount of time, which kind of dives a bit deeper into what our background looks like. So kind of the goal for today is we're going to be focusing on the kind of beginning of an alumni award process. And it doesn't necessarily have to be alumni awards. It could also be board nominations. It could be student scholarships and grants. A lot of these concepts apply, but there are some kind of core elements to an award workflow or process from like an engagement perspective, as well as the enrichment of data that I do want to talk about. But I like to think of both Reviewr as well as these types of campaigns as an experience. And really, there's 3 kind of core experiences that make them up. There's the applicant side of things, so both nominator, nominee, and alumni. There's some of the more administrator side of things, so the boots on the ground program management experiences, and then also the volunteer and the donor and alumni experience as well. So I kind of alluded to future webinars that we'll be doing, and those are going to be focusing on those second and third experiences. My main goal today is kind of the more of a hot topic right now is the front facing nomination collection side of things that goes into a nomination or an alumni award process. Specifically focusing on kind of 3 key areas. So the first element that we're going to talk about is how do we lower the barrier for nominators that both increases the volume but also maximizes potential outreach and marketing and repeat nominations, year-over-year participation, and things like that. Some of the more unique models we've started to see. But what comes with that then is how do you make sure that you're capturing the essential data that you need either by or for the nominees that ensures not just a fair and accurate review process, but also one that can be leveraged to enrich your alumni databases. Some of our clients, like the University of Tennessee, uses a lot of that information to power their alumni scoring and a lot of those types of metrics as well. So, how do you lower the barrier for nominators while still capturing the absolutely essential data that you need, both to make informed award decisions, but also for own personal record keeping and things like that? And then also potentially some of those third party elements. And I know third party is a broad term, but that could be self driven research that alumni staff are doing about nominees. It could be poking around things like LinkedIn pages. It could be, doing some self research on local articles or news that they've done. It could be doing some of your own research when it comes to your alumni databases and incorporating that, but then also some of those third party individuals. So how do you collect things like reference requests from outstanding individuals and things like that? And then also I want to just at a high level talk a little bit about the compliance side of things, right? How to conduct a fair and accurate review process that removes things like biases and is engaging for the applicant. So those are some of the key elements that we're going to talk about today. Obviously, we're going to have to end open things up for a Q&A. Again, just a quick little housekeeping kind of as I get into a quick introduction of who we are at Reviewr. Why am I even qualified to talk about this, or am I even qualified to talk about this? So there is a chat bot that I am opening up here right now. Everyone is muted as they attend this webinar. If we want to unmute towards the end, we definitely can, but I want to make sure I give people ample opportunity to ask questions in the chat. I'll be kind of trying to read them as I go. So if it's related to a topic that we're talking about, or if it's something you want to talk about at the end or for a future conversation, please, all ears. These webinars are intended to be value-driven processes for you guys. And so if there's things that you want to learn more about, by all means, we can kind of shift the conversation. We can completely wing it. It's up to you. So kind of a quick introduction. So who is Reviewr? So we call ourselves an online applicant submission management software. We do that because, as I mentioned earlier, while we very much are focused on alumni recognition awards, that concept of collecting nominations, managing them, and conducting a review and selection process isn't unique to an award program. So the vast majority of the alumni associations that we work with, as well as just university systems in general, are using us also for their admissions processes, scholarships, some of their honors programs, grants, board nominations, and things like that. So really anything that requires the intake of applications, the review and selection process, and of course the decision making. But from an alumni award perspective, so we're a CAAE partner sponsor member. Had an incredible opportunity this year to attend the Winter Institute meeting. Was able to kind of meet with about 90 or so executives at alumni associations and really learn more about some of the unique nuances that make an alumni association click, as well as some of the local challenges that we may be facing here, obviously in a post-COVID environment with people coming back to school and this kind of new era that we're living in, and how do we more engage alumni as well as your local communities and things like that. So, been doing this now for almost a decade. Right now, we work with probably give or take 50 or so colleges and universities, really of all sizes and shapes, everything from some of your massive, top 5 volume universities in the country to small local, junior colleges here in the heart of the Midwest where we're looking. So the best part of my job and kind of that broad clientele that we're working with is that we've seen every imaginable workflow, everything from some of the really cool processes that some of our clients are doing to some of the more manual processes that are moving onto platforms like Reviewr. And my main goal here is, in general, there's so much competition amongst university systems. So if you have like a business school, obviously they're going to be competing with other business schools for talent. Alumni associations, there is no competition, right? Your alumni are your alumni. And so it's very easy for us to kind of bring like-minded individuals together. We can collaborate with one another. It's all about sharing best practices and resources. And there are a select few alumni associations that I've built very strong relationships with over the last 3 or 4 years that are kind of at the cutting edge of what I would say alumni recognition awards, that are doing things maybe a bit unique or a bit outside of what the normal traditional models look like, which I love to see take those models and make them available to other people, either within Reviewr almost as like a templated type of program where we can almost piggyback up off of what other people are doing to be successful, or leveraging that to kind of make small tweaks to your unique processes. But it's all about visibility and transparency and kind of helping grow these programs together. So kind of at a high level, that's what our background looks like. My main goal today, again, is to focus on really kind of 3 key focus areas, but in a more of an interactive model. So kind of talking through hypothetically and philanthropy wise, like the goals behind why we do things the way we do, but then visualize it in real time using one of your peer alumni associations as an example. Obviously, we had stripped out some of the logos and things like that, but then we decided to throw them back on there and kind of celebrate the success that they're having. So With that said, we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to get jumping right into things. If anybody has any trouble hearing me, if we lose any connection again, please do throw that in the chat box so I don't spend 15 minutes talking to myself. So, with that said, let's get rolling. So, the first thing I want to talk about today is the nomination process and really breaking it out into two unique elements: the nomination process and then the nominee process. And the entire goal here is lowering the barrier, making the nomination process so stinking simple that there's no excuse for people to participate in these programs. It's intended to increase both volume as well as marketing outreach efforts. So how do we do that? Again, I talked about breaking this out into two pieces, and we will look at that. But the first step to this puzzle is focusing on the nominator. In theory, it could be people doing self nominations. But what we really want to see is nominators nominating other unique individuals for these prestigious awards, and then having those nominees themselves come back later and interact with it. Now, I completely understand how this model is a giant shift, how awards have previously been done. It's historically been done by nominations coming in. They stay very, very private, and the nominees never know that they've been nominated until they've been named a finalist, or in some instances, they never find out because they weren't made a finalist. And I understand the goals and the concepts behind that. It creates some excitement and a surprise element to it. With that type of model, you are leaving a little bit on the table as far as data collection and accuracy. A lot of times what we find is that when the bulk of a nomination is submitted by an external nominator, so think about that, for example, of, hey, I want to nominate Steve for this award program, and in doing so, tell us, Steve's current job, tell us Steve's current resume, right? There's a strong likelihood that either A, those nominators either don't have it, B, they're going to go to the nominee anyway, so it's no longer a surprise, or C, they're going to submit some type of information that just isn't current and it isn't up to date, and that has a very negative impact down the road when you go to begin doing the review and selection process. So again, we want to kind of think about this as kind of a very simple process for the nominator. So number one, having a very simple entry point for them to go to. We don't want them to have to go to 6 different websites or 3 or 4 different tools. We don't want them to have to download Word documents or PDFs or Excel spreadsheets that then they have to figure out how they have to save locally, or print off or do things through paper. We don't want them to have to go through the legwork of building out nominations and then trying to figure out how to send it back to you, which means sending it via email or uploading it to websites as an attachment with a bunch of third-party elements. We want to basically send them to one centralized hub, which obviously in this case will be Reviewr, but one centralized place. We also want to focus on what we're collecting from them. And what I mean by that is it's really easy for us to dream up this perfect environment of all the data we want from nominators. But at the end of the day, do we really need all of that? So the question is, if you don't think you need it, then you absolutely don't. We want to make it super simple. It's who are you? What are you nominating them for and why? That's it. Nothing more. Just who, what, and why. And then the bulk of the nominations will come later on. And we can kind of get into some more unique methods behind that. There's kind of a middle ground. So if you don't want the nominees to join the process and fill out like the bulk labor end of these nomination forms, maybe you have the who, what, and why portion come in. There is an internal review and selection and narrowing down process of, okay, great, of the X number of nominations we got, like these are the core ones that we want to focus on this year. And then at that point, we can actually invite the nominator or the nominee to come back and then fill out some additional stuff. So while I still don't love to see that coming from the nominator because it still may not be accurate, at least we're now narrowing in on only those that have kind of a shot at proceeding onwards and then allowing them to not waste time, right? We'll kind of, again, get into what I want to see captured. It also does create the opportunity, though, for you to kind of layer on more than that. So just because we're going to focus on the who, what, and why doesn't mean you have to stop there. By all means, add a bunch of optional fields. Just by absolutely don't make it required, and also make it simple for them to do. So some of the cool things that we have started to see recently is like video testimonials. So if I want to nominate Susie for this year's 40 Under 40 awards, maybe I'm super passionate about my nomination, and I'm going to record like a quick little 3-minute video, really giving Susie a testimonial on why she's a deserving candidate. Again, that's not required for me. I'm doing this on my own, so I can't complain about it. While at the same time, You're probably not going to use it in the review and selection process, but 6 months down the road, it's extremely powerful marketing collateral. Let's say, for example, an awards gala, when you have, 5 different finalists per award category sitting there at a table, and you're playing these videos on a live stage. That's also a great use case of where maybe we don't need to collect that information on the front end. We save that only for those finalists, and then maybe we reach back out to the nominees and say, hey, we went through the entire process. Susie actually came in and did her submission. She is now selected as a finalist. Now, do you mind recording like a 2-minute snippet of why you think she's deserving, and then have that in your back pocket? So again, I'm not trying to say don't collect this information, but maybe just choose the time when it makes sense to lower the barrier. And then the last piece of this is always be collecting. So many, the vast majority of the alumni awards that we work with are cyclical based. There's a certain time period and a certain time of the year where nominations open. They go through this nomination collection process. They get right up until the deadline, and then they end up extending it anyways, because if you give people dates and deadlines, they're going to procrastinate anyways and wait until the very last minute. So then they open it back up and they close it back down and then reopen it back up. So one thing we like to see is have an open-ended call for nominations. You can still have kind of soft deadlines and say, hey, for this year's award process, we're closing nominations at this time, but you can still be collecting nominations and backfill it, right? So, for example, if nominations open up in August, maybe start collecting nominations in December that are now eligible, right, for that next cycle. So always be collecting to make sure you have a kind of that robust information. It also allows you guys to start to leverage that data for other potential use cases, either for donor relations and marketing, or whatever it might be. So with all that said, and all that in mind, if you have any questions, please do throw them in the chat. But I do want to walk you through what I mean by this. So again, I talked a little bit about the split process where nominators submit something and then the nominees come into that. So let's kind of take a look at in review, or at least how that would look. Specifically, we're going to be doing this for the University of Georgia for their 40 under 40 awards, with some of their dummy data. So obviously, we're not going to look at real University of Georgia alumni. So bear with me here as I go ahead and share my screen. To that tour. So you should be at this point seeing the University of Georgia's Alumni Association. So one of the elements that we have at Reviewr are marketing landing pages and microsites. I mentioned earlier that we don't want to see your nominators having to go all over the place to find where to go. So the majority of our clients will have like an awards page set up with all the information about the program. And then on this, they throw a giant button that says, click here to submit a nomination. And then when they click on that, it brings them to a very dedicated landing page that's hyper specific on what you need from them. There's a couple elements here that by no means are required, one of which is an account creation side of things, which I'll come back into either later on or in a private discussion. If this is something that you're interested in exploring, just note that so much of our platform is configurable and unique to what your desires are. This is just an example, at least what the University of Georgia is doing. But in their use case, they have two things that I think are really important that I think is really powerful. Number one is that dual process, right? So nominators submit part of their elements, and then nominees finish the rest. The second piece to this is eligibility. One of the biggest frustrations that we often hear is that there's these hyper specific awards. So in this example, it's a 40 under 40. So if you're over the age of 40, you're not even eligible. So why would we waste individuals' time who aren't even eligible for it? So we can build in things like eligibility quizzes that based off of a series of questions says, hey, unfortunately, this isn't an award that you're eligible for. However, you may be eligible for this one, and this one, or take it a step further and say, hey, based on what you submitted, while you're not eligible for this award, you are, however, eligible for this one. Click here to proceed on. So that way you're not going to lose them as a participant. You're just kind of guiding them where they actually belong. And if in some use case that they're not eligible for anything, at least we didn't waste their time filling out these lengthy nomination forms, as well as your time having to review them at some point. So in Reviewr, the entire premise of the platform is profile centric. So basically they're going to come to this landing page, they're going to click submit a nomination, they're going to create a profile, which I think is incredibly important because you can start to collect some really powerful data, not just about who they are, but also who they're nominating. It's a great user experience. So I talked earlier about how we want to lower the barrier for them. So for example, if it's August and there's a thunderstorm that rolls through and they knock out power, it'll auto save their information so we don't lose their hard work. Maybe they're a year over year repeat nominator. Maybe we want to pull in some of the existing information that we have about them with the option for them to autofill. We can also do some pretty cool like single sign-on things here as well with alumni databases. So by no means is any of this required, but it is kind of an option that we provide. Now, really what I want to focus on though is the simple nomination process. And again, this is the identical nomination form that the University of Georgia is using. And you're going to see firsthand really how basic and simple it is, yet how powerful it is for them. So from the nominator's perspective, we're asking for, again, who are you? So in this example, me, Kyle, I am the nominator. It's then going to ask who I'm nominating. So, big American Idol fan, nominating Ryan Seacrest. It's going to ask me to fill in some information about Ryan. Now, this is key because some of this information may be inaccurate, right? And this is where I kind of want to stress that if I don't have Ryan Seacrest in this example coming into Reviewr and submitting information about himself, we're never going to get accurate data. So, when I say he graduated in 1992, what if this award program is only for graduates who were graduated in year 1990 or earlier? Right? And I put in 1992. That means that you're going to have to cross-reference and correct and go through every single form field and make sure it's actually accurate. Or in this example, what if Ryan's address or his phone number has changed? You want that up-to-date information so you can power your alumni database. But who are you going to trust more? Me, Kyle, submitting for Ryan, or Ryan himself? So that's at a high level example. And then the last piece of this is, at a high level, like what are the 2 or 3 accomplishments or things that you want to recognize Ryan for? And that's it. Nothing else. This is great because we might have 15 people coming in and submitting nominations about Ryan. So we can kind of count up the number of times he's been nominated. We can start to identify trends on why he was nominated without having to compare too much stuff. If you do take in these nominations as part of the review process, your team isn't sifting through like 15, 16, 17 different short answers and essays for Ryan himself. It's super narrow and focused. From a time perspective, it might take only 10 minutes for a nominator to come in here and do this. And then once they submit it, they can actually then click add another and start to fill out more nominations for other people. So again, we're very, very quickly increasing the volume pool of potential candidates while also ensuring data privacy and accuracy and all those kind of important metrics. Now, from an administrator perspective, which we'll focus on here in a future webinar, we're also starting to gather some powerful insights on, who are your nominators? How long is it taking them to fill out nomination forms? Who are they nominating? Is there a conversion problem, right? Are there people who are starting nominations and not finishing, or even going to the full spectrum? Are there people who are submitting nominations and then the nominee themselves are not finishing things up? We need to know those as well as be able to send out reminder messages and kind of usher people along. So really powerful insights that obviously without this type of infrastructure, we wouldn't be able to do. Again, love this model. We do have kind of templated approaches to this as well. So we can very quickly and easily deploy this for really any alumni association that wants to not necessarily mimic this, but also use it as a framework to kind of make it unique to yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and share back to the presentation, and then we'll bounce back in here in just a second. So the next piece of this puzzle that I want to talk about is the next phase, which is the nominee, right? So I talked a little bit about how nominations come first, and that's great. So now we got all these nominations that are coming in, but at the same time, those nominations are super basic. By no means can you review that data and make informed decisions off of it, right? Like there's no way that's enough information for you to announce alumni award recipients. So what we want to see happen now is either in real time notifications that go out to the nominee that says, hey, Ryan Kyle's nominated you for this year's 40 under 40. Click here to accept the nomination and fill out your profile. Or maybe you don't do that. You instead either narrow it down and then reach out to the select few nominations. Maybe you want to vet them first and then reach out to them. You control how that notification process happens and when they rejoin in. So we'll kind of come back to what that workflow looks like in Reviewr. But the main goal here is really, I would say 3 parts. So number one is that we have data accuracy. Again, I talked about this so many times. Alumni associations face a challenge of enriching their alumni databases. They do a great job having a profile about an alumni, but they have a tough time over time keeping that profile updated with current job, current address, current phone number, all this really essential stuff that you need for other campaigns that are happening on campus. So by doing this process, now Ryan is entering in a reviewer, and he's going to give you the opportunity to ask for some of that key detail that not only are you going to use for the alumni awards, but it's instantly going to go to your alumni database, right? And you're going to have up-to-date records. It's also nice too because you're engaging them. So that's kind of, I'm going out of order here, but you're now having an opportunity for one-to-one direct integration with alumni. In this use case, I know it's a made-up nomination, but Ryan Seacrest is a very prestigious alumni of the institution. When have we last talked to Ryan? Has it been 5 years? Has it been 10 years? Now he's interacting with us one to one. It's now on you, right, to maximize that opportunity, but at least you got a shot. You're in the door. He's now interacting with the process, and you have one to one communication with them. Leverage it, use it, and excel with it. The last piece of this, and this is the one that I really want to focus on, is a fair and accurate, non-biased review and selection process. One of the biggest challenges that we see, and this isn't just when it comes to award programs, it could also be board nominations or scholarships, is what are we doing with these nomination forms? The nominator themselves is a volunteer. They're going out of their way to submit a nomination. That means that they're going to put forth different energy levels. Some people are better writers than others. Some people have different intentions than others. While I wouldn't think that anybody has a bad intention of submitting an award nomination on behalf of somebody else, my wife, for example, is a much better writer than I am. She's going to write a much more compelling story about why I should win an alumni award than I would be able to write for her. So when your review team sits down and you go to conduct a review process and you're comparing those two pieces of work, it's a no-brainer that her nomination is going to be scored significantly higher than mine. But does that take away from me as a nominee? Absolutely not. I might be the more qualified nominee to receive this year's award. Or there might be an element that they're just not aware of that they completely left off that would have completely moved the needle. So two things are happening here. Number one is that we're putting the work on the the nominee. So there's no excuse for them not to put in the time and energy. If they want to win the award, they're going to put in the time. If they don't care about it, then they're not going to, and they probably wouldn't win it anyways. But again, the second piece to that is it's an opportunity for them to submit information that's unique to them that nobody else is going to have. Again, it could be current address, it could be resumes, it could be accomplishments and achievements. It allows you to kind of build a more personal story with them that, again, the nominators wouldn't know, things like that. So in theory, this sounds great, but we just injected a bunch of additional moving parts that probably didn't exist in the past. So we injected this brand new concept of having this broken out into two pieces, nominator, nominee. We've also now injected this element of having to notify them. We injected this element of having conversions, right? Nominations and then completed nominations. So how do you track that type of stuff? And of course, that's where we come into play. So bouncing back over to another screen share, I want to walk you through. We're going to pick up where we left off. So in this use case, I just submitted a nomination. I, as a nominator, could submit additional ones. But what's actually going to happen in this example is in real time, Ryan just got an email that says, "Hey, Ryan, congratulations. You've been nominated for this year's 40 under 40. Now, again, this is purely an example. It doesn't have to be automated. You can control when those reminders come out. You can control who they go to. Again, I mentioned that maybe there is a middle ground, at least initially, as we kind of go through this transactional process of updating the process where the nominee is the one who actually will come back later on and do additional deliverables. We're just not asking for that up front. So in that use case, they would be the ones notified, and maybe you pick and choose specifically who it is. So there is a middle ground, but in this use case, Ryan just got this email. Ryan is completely stoked. He's a huge Bulldog fan. He's excited to finish his profile. He moves on, and he's presented with this kind of welcome message of, "Hey, Ryan, congratulations for being nominated for this year's prestigious award program. We're building up excitement. We're also setting expectations of what we expect from Ryan. So here's some of the types of information that we're going to need from you. You may not have this right now. That's totally fine. You're a very busy person. You can save, you can log out, you can work at your own pace. Secretly on the back end, you know this. You can see how far Ryan's made it. You can send him a reminder message. Again, it's giving you the opportunity to engage with Ryan that previously you may not have had. Now, as far as the information goes, so in this specific use case, the University of Georgia is trying to get up-to-date information about Ryan. So obviously they want to make sure, hey, Ryan, like, is that still your name? Is that still your address? What's your graduation year? What school and college did you attend from? Where are you currently living? What's your current job? What's your current title? Who's your employer? All these things that, again, the nominator may know about Ryan, but Ryan does know for a fact. So as soon as this gets submitted, this instantly in real time is going to the alumni database and enriching the data. That's one piece to it. The second piece are all these short answers and essays. So again, historically, with an alumni award process or just awards in general, these questions are going to be asked, right? They're going to be asking, describe your current organization, your background, walk us through your career path, tell us more about your proudest accomplishments, tell us more about your community involvement in three short bullets. What's an interesting fact about you? This is stuff that, again, we can share with you if you're interested in incorporating these questions. But historically, this is being asked by the nominator. Now, let's role play. I'm a nominator. I'm doing this on a Saturday morning, drinking my coffee before my son wakes up, which at this point in time is like 5:30 a.m. And I'm trying to very quickly fill this out. Do you think I, as a nominee, am going to put forth a bunch of energy into this? Probably not. However, Ryan, super stoked about this award program. He's going to sit down. He's going to fill out one or two of these questions. He's going to save. He's going to log out. He's going to come back later. He's going to fill out a couple more. And this is going to be really, really powerful essays that we're collecting from Ryan. Once he's done with this, then we move on to the next piece of this puzzle. And I'm going to pause here again, come back in a second to the slide. And this is the last thing that we're going to talk about and focus on today. And it's the enrichment of data as well as collecting outstanding third party information. So things like reference requests, it could be background checks, all that kind of fun stuff. So again, bear with me. I am resharing my screen to our slide. And now it's all about data. So we've kind of gone all over the place, which I think is okay. Conversations led us here. The goal here is to talk about now that we have all this powerful information, like what do you do with it? So sending it to your alumni databases, also kind of thinking through like what do you really need for the review process? Because if you don't think you need it for the review process, don't collect it. If you are collecting stuff in Reviewr, we have a concept called blinding. So things like demographic details, personal identifying information, current job status, all that stuff that you probably do want for your database, but by no means should be included in the review process because it may contribute to a fair and biased review. We can collect stuff, but then strip it down for different people so they can't see it. It also options, the type of content you're collecting. So it's 2023, hard to believe, almost 2024. We want to start to see a more modern approach to this. So why wouldn't we maybe ask Ryan to submit like a quick 3-minute video on his iPhone of why he's deserving of the award program, right? Let's get out of text-based nomination forms. While essays are short and simple and they're easy to submit, they're not very engaging for two purposes. Number one is that my gut tells me that when your review team sits down, they'd much rather watch a quick little 3-minute video about Ryan by Ryan. It's unique. It allows his personality to shine. It separates him from other candidates. But also number two is that at some point there's going to be a reception party, right? There's going to be an awards gala. It's going to be homecoming related. How do we take that multimedia concept, ditch that off to your marketing team and let them shine with it? But if we don't have it, well, then you can't do anything, right? And then the other piece of the puzzle is okay. Ryan seems like a great guy, and this is I gotta be careful what I say because this is totally made up information. But just because we got this really powerful nomination submitted by Ryan, just because Ryan submitted this video about himself, doesn't mean he should win an award. There might be outstanding third-party factors. It could be he was a recipient last year. It could be he doesn't interact much with the alumni association. Maybe your alumni scoring also contributes to people's nomination forms. Maybe this nominee is battling some type of legal process, right? Those are things that you're not going to be able to pick up on it. And so a couple things, we can do some really powerful integrations with like background checks and checking on your behalf so you don't have to spend the time doing it. $20 a background check goes a long ways, right? They can ensure that your nominees are good standing alumni. But also allows your team to kind of come in here and they can do some of their own research. They can go to LinkedIn, they can find some articles, they can write their own kind of synopsis on interactions that this nominee has had with the university or the college, add that to the profile as well. So again, the idea about these nominations coming is meant to be kind of broken into three pieces: nominees portion, nominators portion, nominees portion, and then alumni associations portion. And that collectively makes up what I call a nominee profile, and that's what gets reviewed. Now, the main thing I want to talk about here is collecting things like references. References are such a powerful tool because it's a non-biased third party who are speaking words highly of the nominee. With that said, references are a pain in the butt, and they're a pain for everyone. They're a pain for you to track down which references you've got. It's tough for you to collect them. It's tough for you to figure out who they belong to. It's a pain for the person writing the reference because they're being asked to spend time out of their day by a certain day and time to submit something from scratch with no expectations. So how do we solve that problem? Because again, I want to see the majority of alumni awards doing reference requests, but I also want to lower the barrier. So in Reviewr, we have a really powerful feature where, and again, we'll kind of get into industry trends here, where the nominator puts in, hey, who is this person writing the reference? In this case, Tony Smith. And it'll actually signal an email notification that goes directly to Tony that says, hey, Tony, Ryan Seacrest has been nominated for this year's 40 Under 40 awards. You've been requested to write a support letter or a reference on his behalf. Click here to do so. Now, this is where things get super exciting. And again, this is a big shift in things that we've seen in the past. Historically, Tony would sit down, pen and paper, open up a Word doc, and they start typing out a reference letter. They would have letterheads, right? But now we've created all sorts of extra work. Tony needs to figure out how he wants to submit his reference. He needs to figure out how to submit it to you. He needs to figure out what he wants to write. And then the next piece to this is that your review team is now going to literally sit down and read a bunch of letters. Each person that wrote that letter is going to have the same challenge that the nominators had. They're going to have different writing characteristics. Some people are going to put forth more time and energy than others. And all it does is make the review process unfair. You're not comparing apples to apples. Again, my wife is going to write a significantly better reference about me than I'd write about her, just because she's a better writer. So to lower that, what we're doing here is we're sending Tony a notification. Tony clicks on a link, and then instead of being told, hey, go from scratch write this letter. Instead, Tony is being requested to create a reference template. So Tony is presented with a 3-question form, and every single reference gets those same 3 questions. What those questions are, we have a whole repository that we can share with you, or you can come up with your own. But it's basically like if you can dream up, hey, when references come in, like what are the 3 key things we'd love them to talk about? Tell us a personal story about Ryan. Tell us about a time when Ryan went above and beyond and contributed to the community, right? Something really unique that speaks about him as an individual and not necessarily the accolades, right? Because accolades are just that. Bring some personality to this. They are then guided, right? So that individual fills out the reference template. They know exactly what to submit because there's 3 questions. Maybe you can do optional file uploads. Maybe again, because they're references, you can do an optional video testimonial coming from the reference, and then they submit that. But you as a program manager can in real time see, okay, out of my outstanding nominations, how many outstanding references do I have versus how many references have been submitted? Who are they? How far have they made? You can send them built-in reminder message as well. So it's really easy for us to automatically follow up with those references to make sure they get the work in, while at the same time we're making it easy for the reference to do their job. And every single nominee has the exact same data points about them. So when your review committee goes to sit down, number one is that the nominations are there, but they're focusing on what the nominees submitted. So again, fair, accurate, compliant review, proof of process. 2, every reference has the same data points about them. So now they're comparing apples to apples. And when you go to do a review and selection process, you now can ensure that entire compliant process. So again, historically, this wouldn't have been an option without a platform like us. And then the last piece of the puzzle is there are going to be some type of deliverables that you will want from Ryan. Things like resumes, headshots, videos, maybe you want social media links, all that kind of fun stuff. So we'll get more into this into a future webinar. But within Reviewr, it can support about 131 file types. So it doesn't matter what format Ryan submits this. Not only can we collect it, but more powerfully is that we can display it to your team. So at some point when your review committee comes into the platform, if you want to review things like resumes or headshots or images, I talked about those video testimonials, whether or not that comes from the nominee, the nominator, or the reference. We don't want your team to then have to download all of those and then go use a bunch of other tools to watch the videos. Again, it's all about lowering the barrier. So in a platform like us, you can actually physically watch that video while leaving notes and comments and filling out score sheets, etc., keeping everything centralized in one place. But that's again for a future discussion. So again, this wraps up the University of Georgia's alumni process. Again, they had a really short form from the nominator. Nominee enters. They had 7 different short answers about themselves. They're collecting up to 2 references, and they're also asking for both a professional resume as well as a headshot and some up-to-date current social media stuff. That's it. Ryan is done. He clicks submit. Boom, he's on to the next. The last piece of this puzzle is transparency. So great. Thank you for your nomination. thank you pages, confirmation emails. Again, it's creating a way for us to build a story. So maybe there are other engagements that you want to do with these alumni. Maybe you want to sell tickets to the gala, all kind of fun stuff. You can redirect them. Again, we just now created the opportunity to collaborate directly with that alumni. So I know we went about 10 minutes over time today, although we did start a little bit late, but I think this is some powerful stuff. What I will do is I will follow up with a recording of this kind of webinar that we can kind of go back and listen to if you want, share with other staff members. I will also be including this interactive kind of tutorial that way you can physically look at what the University of Georgia is doing. This 40 under 40 concept is becoming very, very powerful and popular where they break into the dual process. We have a robust library of like nomination questions. So just because you see this information here doesn't mean that's what you have to use. It's just hopefully a way for you to kind of pick up what others are doing and add your own elements to it. But with that said, I'm going to hang out for maybe 5 or so minutes. Any questions at all, please do throw them in the chat. We'll answer them as we go. And as I'm kind of waiting for some of these chatbot items to come in, what I will say is future webinars are going to be broken out by these experiences. So today we focus very heavily on the nominator nominee experience. The next one that we're going to focus on is program management. So I know it could be scary now that we implemented all these new and modern approaches to an alumni award. How do you actually physically manage that? Don't worry, we got you covered. So there's some best practices around like tracking progress as we go, sending out reminder messages, engaging with the alumni, accessing the information, blinding of information, sharing with your team, creating review workflows. So how do you make sure that your review team doesn't get overwhelmed? How do you make sure it's a fair, accurate, diverse review process? And then the third piece of that puzzle is typically these review teams are committee based. So how do we kind of set them up for success with ease of access to these nominations? How do you conduct a review and selection process? How do you do a multi-phase review and selection process? Once recipients have been selected, how do we publicly recognize them and celebrate them and things of that nature? So these are going to be future conversations that we'll be having that we'll be sending reminders of. But with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, if anybody has any questions, if they want us to, pick our brain a little bit about kind of what your current alumni award process looks like, and it doesn't even have to be related to Reviewr and how we could power it, just industry things that we're seeing or best practices or feedback, by all means, we're open to not necessarily auditing programs. I don't know if I love that term, but kind of diving deep into what you're up to and potentially making some recommendations. So as always, complete open door. Any questions, you know where to find us. Really appreciate your time today.